Welcome back to another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast with your hosts, Jody Roscoe and Heather Fisher. We're talking about all things downsizing, from our own experiences with clients to guest experts. Let's make downsizing easier, one conversation at a time.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast. We are here with another guest today. We're really excited. We have Mark Healy with Senior Care Authority, but he is also certified in Beyond Driving with Dignity, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome.
So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm Heather Fisher.
And I'm Jody Roscoe.
And we're real excited to dive into this topic because I think that driving for seniors can be an important topic for families that might be hitting that milestone. So let's dive in and talk about that, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little hard conversation maybe sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Yeah. So, let's just start first. How did you get into having this business? You're, talking about driving with dignity. How did you come to that?
5 years ago, Rachel and I started Senior Care Authority.
Mm-hmm.
My background is physical therapy. I was a physical therapist for 40 plus years. Started in college athletics, moved into outpatient, then went to skilled nursing, and really developed a love of working with the older client, older patient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're fun to push. And
a little sassy sometimes.
Oh, yeah,
stubborn and sassy.
It is fun.
Yeah,
fun.
We've enjoyed each other, but then we were introduced to Beyond Driving with Dignity from a franchise in St. Louis. She said, "Hey, you got to contact this retired Ohio Highway Patrolman in Cleveland, who has put together this program called Beyond Driving with Dignity." He was realizing as he walked away from your home telling you that your loved one had just been killed, either they were a senior driver or they'd been killed by a senior driver, that he said there had to be a better way as he was walking back to his cruiser. So he put together this program to help the older senior driver stay safe and to keep the other people on the road safe. So he certified us, back in COVID.
Yeah.
And then it was such a significant program that the franchise we purchased actually purchased the program from Matt. And so now it's part of Senior Care Authority.
Okay, so it's a franchise in and of itself.
No. It used to be.
Oh, it used to be.
It used to be until it was bought by Senior Care Authority.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what the program entails. Is it just having the conversation with seniors about how to stay safe if they're going to continue driving, or having that it's time to, stop driving? Tell us about the program itself.
Sure. It's a 3-hour program. I usually go right to the senior, whether they're living in a community or living at home. I often say that major decisions in life are made at the kitchen table. So it's a one-on-one, me and the older driver, and thank you. And we will just cover it. The first part is a learning conversation. When I was in physical therapy working with the older adults, I often would say they really don't care how much I know until they know how much I care.
Right.
So the
true.
first part of the self-assessment, we call it a self-assessment, is just learning about them, asking questions, checking their memory, how many grandkids, when did you get married, what did you do professionally, those kind of questions. We also talk about driving, their driving history. We talk about any medical issues they might have. We also talk about, we cover some cognitive exercises. So we'll go over a couple cognitive exercises. If after that period of time, I feel that they're safe to drive, and that period of time, that learning conversation, those exercises are all paper and pencil. So they're very familiar. It's just a piece of paper and a pencil. So it takes away some of that anxiety of maybe a computer, a computer test, computer exam, and those type things. And then if I think they're safe and they have a valid driver's license and insurance on the car they want to drive, we'll go for a short drive. Then we'll come back, and the senior and I will have a discussion. We'll make some recommendations. Interesting, we're all at risk. As soon as we get behind the wheel of a car, we're at risk for an accident. Now, there are some people that are at a moderate risk, and those people we recommend they modify their driving. My 90-year-old mother in Houston, Texas, self-modified her driving. She didn't drive at night, didn't drive in the rain, never drove when there were school buses on the road. So all of her appointments, hair appointments, doctor's appointments, everything was between 10 and 2. And so those people recognize they're at a modified risk. There was one time I asked my mother, I said, "Mom, why don't you drive at night?" She says, "Mark, I can't see at night." I said, "Good, Mom, don't drive at night."
Yeah.
Excellent job.
What kinds of things are you seeing when you're out doing that short drive that, decide where on the scale
Like if they're
someone would be modified, or, hey, maybe we shouldn't be driving anymore? What are you looking for?
Well, that's an excellent question. One of the things that happens when you have cognitive challenges is that they tend to drift. So if they're drifting from the lane, that's a big time red flag. If they're slowing down for a red light 100 yards before the light, that's a red light. I was riding with somebody in the Coleraine, Cincinnati area, and we typically don't talk to them while we're driving, but I asked a question, and she almost came to a stop
to answer
the question. She couldn't multitask, so she was either driving
or talking,
and she couldn't do both. So those are the things that we're looking for. Matt tells a story about a gentleman. They went for a ride. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the gentleman turned on his windshield wipers. And Matt asked why he was turning on his windshield wipers, and he really didn't have an answer. This same gentleman turned left. It was a multi-lane intersection. He turned left from the far right-hand lane in the intersection. And shortly after that, Matt asked him to stop the car, and they were going to change. Matt was going to drive home. So, there are times when it's time to say, hey, I think I'll drive us home.
Yeah. Did he know it? Are they self-aware around it or no?
No.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you asked that, because Matt uses that as an example. His wife and his oldest son said, "Dad, you should stop driving. Stop driving, Dad. We feel like you should stop driving." But when Matt came back, the guy said to Matt, "Why do you want me to stop? Why did we change drivers?" He said, "Well, one, you turned on your windshield wipers and it was a beautiful sunny day. 2, you were drifting. 3, you turned left from the right lane, and you're a terrible driver." And he got home and put the keys on the counter and said, "I'm done driving." Told his wife, "I'm done driving." And what the son and the wife had never done is given him objective reasons for stopping the drive. He says, "Matt, if I'm that terrible of a driver, I shouldn't be driving anymore for my safety and other people."
I also think, though, it's not family that they're hearing. Was that what you're going to say? It's not family that they're hearing it from. Sometimes,
we say on a lot of subjects that third-party voice sharing the information sometimes goes a lot further than the spouse or the kids
who keep saying it and have said it. And I get that they're just saying don't drive, and they're not telling him why. And I get that resonated. And I think that is super great information, helpful information. But I also still think sometimes if it's just the people that you may not be quite as receptive as.
Do you think that
to an expert? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think that is, in your experience, a common reaction, that once people go through that evaluation that they can take that information and stop or modify, or do you get a lot of resistance to your advice?
Oh, I would say 20% of the people we work with are driving, whether you tell them they're terrible or not.
Right.
Yeah.
You leave and they're still going to drive.
Oh, absolutely. And then the best part, it's interesting because the best part of the self-assessment is the last 15 to 20 minutes. Because what we do is we bring the family in. So up until that time, it's just one-on-one.
Got it.
Then the last 15, 20 minutes, we bring the family in and we allow the older driver to tell the family kind of what conclusion we had come to. If the conclusion is we need to stop driving, then I turn to the family and say, okay, how do we get mom to hairdresser? How do we get mom to mass? How do we get mom to meet with the gals or dad to meet with the guys at McDonald's on a weekly basis? Because that is one of the main concerns, is independence.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to give up their driving because they don't want, everybody's working. So
Right.
they don't want to rely on their kids. They don't want to rely on, they don't know what they're going to rely on to get. And that, I think we have found just with recent history that isolation is terrible.
Yes, we've talked about that a lot and how COVID just isolated not everyone, but our seniors especially, and it was not a good outcome. That was not a good outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You need to find, and that's really the program, is find out where they're at and then come up with some solutions to help that individual stay independent.
Well, and I think that's what you were saying. Sorry, Heather, I think I keep cutting you off. But I think that's what you were saying before. They didn't give him concrete reasons why he wasn't driving, but they probably also didn't give him the next part, which was, okay, if I'm going to stop driving, now what are we going to do? So I think facilitating that conversation is...
I think that's probably the missing piece in a lot of families that may be trying to have these conversations on their own, is that there's not that follow-up strategy that, all of the independence doesn't have to go away. We have a plan for getting you to these various things, and here's exactly what that looks like. And I think, too, we have just, in serving seniors over the last 5 or 6 years, we've met so many people, and I didn't realize just in communities local to us that there's a lot of transportation available. I know some of the senior rec centers around us, the cities have senior services, not income-based or anything like that, just a need where that you could help that family member that's no longer going to drive. It doesn't necessarily have to be that full weight falls on the family. There could be neighbors or, other people still driving that are going to the same places. If you just help put that plan in place, it could really work.
Well, it's interesting. I had a gentleman that needed to retire from driving. He said, how do I keep meeting up with my veteran friends at McDonald's? And you just you really just kind of have to reach out to those men.
Yeah.
And say, hey, can you just swing by and pick me up? I still want to be involved, but I have to retire from driving because of...
I think that lots of people, but that generation especially doesn't want to bother anybody. Like there's a lot of I just don't want to bother my kids. I don't want to bother anybody. And so having them be like, that's okay. And I'm sure their friends would be happy to pick them up, right?
Oh.
They just don't want to ask.
Well, I think we're all kind of resistant to accepting help.
Yes.
It's just, somebody's sick in your family and people, can we bring meals over? That's okay. In the back of your mind, you're going, yeah. But up front, you're going, I don't know that I want to do that. And it is very difficult.
Yeah.
You really have to highlight the importance of it. Mm-hmm. Matt tells a story early on with the program where he had this young lady. She met him at the door. She was 85 or some. She was up there. Met him at the door, never made eye contact. She was mad right from get-go. And she sat down. By the time they were done with the learning conversation, she was crying. Aww. She said, Matt, I'm not safe on the road. It's obvious. They didn't even get on the road. And Matt brought the family in. And the family got involved. Grandkids got involved. Neighbors got involved. The church got involved. Matt called her 3 months later just for a follow-up. Yeah. Said, how you doing? She said, I'm exhausted. And Matt
Everybody's taking her everywhere.
well, Matt thought maybe she was sick or something, but she says, I've never been this socially engaged in my entire life.
Yeah.
So, it really is, once you break through and see that, we have a slide that says, on one of our presentations, that says, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't.
Yeah.
And the
I love that.
idea is, you can go from the driver's seat to the passenger seat and be chauffeured.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's actually my life, just in case you're wondering, because my husband loves to drive, and so he drives everywhere. And now that my kids have learned how to drive, they want to drive. So I basically hardly ever drive unless I'm driving by myself.
well, you've become the queen.
Yes, I am the queen.
And the queen should be driven from place to place.
Yes, we were just talking about it in the family the other day. I was like, yeah, I'm fourth on the list to drive. So it's Mark and then the kids and then it's me.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It's fine. I'm good with it. I don't mind.
Yep.
Yes. Till you chauffeur me around as
Right.
we go on appointments.
Yes,
So,
we do that.
yes. So do you find that more times than not, it's the family reaching out to you first and bringing you in, or do you have seniors that, know about your program because of presentations you do, or how are you getting in front of people?
I would say it's 50-50. The older drivers, there's two reasons the older driver calls us. The older driver says, we had one young lady in her 80s, just had a birthday. Family called her up and said, now, Mom, that you're 85, you shouldn't be driving anymore. And so she called me and said, hey, I'm sharp as a tack. And she was sharp as a tack. And she was a good driver, except for roundabouts, but we worked through that.
Those are hard for
Everybody's
everybody.
confused by those.
Yeah.
They're new to our area. Those are hard for all of us.
And the other group of the older drivers that call are the ones that have had been to the neurologist or their family practitioners has said, I really think you should get this checked out before you continue to drive. The other 50% are the adult children that, there might be some dissension among the family. The daughter says, Mom shouldn't be driving anymore. The son says, let her drive.
She's fine.
She's fine. And so then we can come in and just really objectively say, modify, stop, or just keep doing what you're doing.
I love that your program has the way it's structured with so much time, one-on-one in that consultation with the senior, without the audience of everybody watching the cognitive tests and the conversation and that high pressure of everybody is, waiting for me to fail at this. And it's so personal and dignified for that person to go through it, but then having the family at the end so that when you leave, everybody's on board with what's next or what is recommended and hopefully can wrap around that person and make it a success. And I think if you were missing either of those components, it just would feel like ganging up on somebody and taking something away versus making a plan to keep everything they love, just in a different fashion. So I think that's awesome.
And I think when, it sounds like the beginning part, the cognitive part, and even the driving part, there are great places for people to realize themselves without you even saying it. Sometimes they won't, but it sounds like sometimes they do.
Oh.
You don't even have to say it because you've given them an opportunity to kind of give themselves a little test, and they know, hey, I'm not doing great at this.
Yeah.
And so when people figure it out for themselves, it's so much more powerful than when somebody's telling them, Mom, you can't drive, Mom, you can't drive. But if they've figured that out on their own, there is no more work. They've already done it.
Well, and that's the hope. That's why
Yeah.
that's why it's titled a self-assessment, and it's beyond driving with dignity. I tell people, I can end either one of your driving experience, of course, unless you're being chauffeured.
Yeah, I'm
with
the queen, right?
Yeah, well, you can end it with a tow truck.
Yeah.
I can end my mother in Houston, Texas, I can end her driving career.
Take the car.
Just take the car. There's no dignity there.
Right.
There's no plan, and you need the plan. It's one of the interesting things is the National Highway Traffic Safety Association says that if we all live long enough, we'll all outlive our safe driving by 7 to 10 years. So
It's terrifying.
Well, we tell people, plan. You need to have a plan, because if you do live long enough, even if you're cognitively normal, you're going to
Your reflexes just aren't there anymore.
You're gonna end up where you're just processing slower. It's interesting. I saw a test where they took a college-age student and they took an 80-year-old, and they gave them the same test. And the college-age student whipped it off in 15, 20 minutes. The older person took 45 minutes, but they both scored identical.
Yeah.
So it isn't a matter of not having the wisdom or the knowledge to do things. It's the processing of that information.
Yeah. So, do you have any tips for people who are just looking, to have the conversation with their parents and get it started? I think, just showing up with you in tow would not go over well either. So what?
Never has.
We're here to give you a test, Mom.
What does that process look like? Are you reaching out by phone to the senior so they know what's ahead, or how does that typically, come about?
Well, if it's, obviously it's the senior calling me, we'll explain the entire program. If it's the adult child, then we'll just say, these are the suggestions I would make. They've probably had the conversation. If they're to this point, they've probably had that conversation with mom or dad.
Yeah.
Or their doctor has had that conversation, and they feel some pressure to, hey, I can do this. Type thing. So, it's both ways. We do want them to understand what's going to happen. That the older driver, if it's the adult children, the older driver typically has some resistance because they really don't want to know. Or in the back of their mind, they know what the results are going to be.
Yeah, so they're afraid of the results. They're afraid of losing their freedom. What else? What are the other things that you see?
Well, independence. Independence is huge. They're afraid of being told by their adult children who they changed their diapers that they need to do anything, which our parents don't want to hear anything from us.
They don't want the changeover to being the kid and not the parent. Their kid's parenting them.
And we have found that when they're afraid of isolation. They really are. They may not be able to articulate that, but they're afraid of, I go to the doctor on a monthly basis. Who's going to get me there?
Yeah.
Or just I will be alone because I won't be able to go anywhere. I'll be stuck in my house.
And, there's a study out of Harvard that says isolation is worse than smoking 14 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
So you've got, I was listening to one of your podcasts of Bethany Village.
Yeah.
And I had to turn it off just before she answered the question of what would an individual gain by moving into independent living.
Yeah.
And it's the socialization.
Yeah.
It's the having other people your own age. It's all of those positives that when my mother had a stroke in Houston is what we ended up moving her. And when she got to a building, it was assisted living, and she got her medication on time and got her 3 meals, she improved.
Yeah.
So now, how does the individual who can no longer drive get their meals, get their food? And the older population doesn't understand that their neighbor, where every week the Kroger truck stops in front of their house.
Yeah.
They can't be ordering their stuff online.
They don't understand some of that stuff. It's interesting. We ordered stuff from my mom from Cincinnati to Houston. We just call up.
The groceries are on your front porch. Go get them.
Yeah. But
I saw them on that Ring doorbell I installed.
But those are the things. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I'm just going to be sitting here all alone. And one of the major concerns, and we've found it again, unfortunately, with COVID, is they don't go to their doctor. So if they have a problem, it doesn't get taken care of right away. They don't go to the things that they need to take care of. And so that's a big thing.
I think speaking to a lot of our listeners who may be those adult children, that point is just needs hammered home, that you can't take away from your parents' independence without a plan in place as a family to fill all those gaps. And so it's easy to say, oh, mom should not be driving anymore. It's not safe. Dad shouldn't be on the road. But you have to complete that circle and fill in the gaps either with family members or with services, that you manage the services, because our seniors can't, like you said, order the delivery or all of that. So if some of those services are filling the gaps, you need to be in charge of making sure they happen, making sure their medication gets picked up from the pharmacy, making sure they get to their appointments, and don't leave it with you can't drive anymore, Mom, and then walk out the door and say, okay, I'm busy. It has to be a full plan.
Well, that's the easy way.
Yeah.
So if the family isn't around, some people don't have family or isn't able, what other ways are you finding to help people get where they need to be?
Well, Dayton RTA has a service. They'll go door to door. It's a ride share, so you'll be sharing that with other people. There's an app called Go Grandparent.
Okay.
That's fun. I haven't heard of that.
Where you can, the adult children can set it up. The nice thing about that is they'll alert whoever you need to alert. I'm at your mother's home. I picked her up. I've dropped her off at Walmart. She said she'll be done in an hour. And they can just kind of follow Mom. There's the commercial taxis, and it's
like Ubers.
Thank you, Uber, and those type things. The different counties,
which is great because we didn't used to have that. That didn't used to be a thing. But Uber,
well, we had taxis.
Yeah, but you in more urban areas, yes, not as great in rural areas, but yes.
Yeah. So and it's interesting. I have a neighbor that has been diagnosed with a vision challenge. So he can no longer drive. But he goes to the community center. The Warren County picks him up for $1.50, takes him to the community center, picks him up 2 hours later after he's walked his 5 miles, and drives him home for $3.
That's great.
So there are things out there. You just have to.
So city, county kind of things to check into.
City, county, community centers.
Yeah.
And it may be time, we were talking about the independent living places, but it may be time to have a bigger picture conversation about what that looks like, because they have, they take people everywhere, right? So if you, yes.
Oh, absolutely. We've been to communities that have a 20-mile radius.
Yeah.
So they'll take a client to a doctor's appointment. We were talking to one community. The family lived about 15 miles away, but he would drive to their house for Sunday dinner.
Every Sunday.
And the community said,
no problem.
We'll take them.
I love it.
And it's like, well, there you go.
Yeah.
That eliminates, again, you become a king or a queen, and you get chauffeured around.
Right.
And then having the socialization with the family.
So sometimes maybe the driving is a catalyst to a bigger conversation. Maybe not. Maybe they're good and they just need to, figure out a plan and stay at home. But sometimes it could do that.
The first step for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Looking at changes ahead.
So if you're the adult parent or kid and you haven't really broached the conversation, you're seeing signs that maybe you feel like they shouldn't be on the road. What do you say? What are the right things to say and what are the wrong things to say?
We always encourage the adult children to speak in objective terms rather than, Dad, I feel like. Dad, the neighbors told me that you ran over their mailbox again.
Again.
Your neighbors called and said you backed into their car.
Yeah.
And you didn't know it. Dad, my buddy is on the police force and they said they ticketed you again. Those are the type things. There was a family in Atlanta. The adult children lived in St. Louis. They went home for Thanksgiving, and Mom's car looked pretty beat up. It was just an older car. So they went out on Thanksgiving and bought her a new car. They came back at Christmas, and it looked like someone had taken a snow shovel to her car. And they just recognized that it was time for Mom to retire from driving, because some of the older drivers, I was reading an article about an older driver in a parking lot that hit somebody and just didn't accelerate away, didn't try to hide it, just didn't know it happened.
That's scary.
And, and just drove. So that it's really that they have a decrease in perception, they have a decrease in hearing, they have a decrease in vision.
It could just be medication, too. Like, there's a lot of medication.
Do you want to go there?
I mean, if that's what we think we should.
Well, we refer to it as polypharmacy. Polypharmacy is 5 or more medications. And, what happens, and I use this analogy, is I get bit, I have an allergic reaction, I go to my doctor, he gives me a medication. That medication causes a side effect, so I go to a different doctor. That doctor gives me a medication to cover that symptom. And then I got pounding headache, so I go to a neurologist, and the neurologist gives me a different medication. They did a survey, and they found that 94% of adults, older adults, do not realize they're taking medication that affects them while they're driving. Either causes drowsiness, causes a decrease in peripheral vision, causes all kinds of different things that'll affect you while you're driving. Absolutely dizzy. So those are things that we even cover. We ask them for a medication list in our self-assessment. And then I go home and say, I plug it in and see if any of them. And that's one thing an adult child can do. We recommend perhaps maybe a geriatric pharmacist look at the list, because you may have several physicians. If you don't have a physician kind of managing their medications, you might want a pharmacist to look at them and say, hey, Mom's still driving. We've modified her driving, but do any of these affect her driving? One of the Parkinson's medications causes drowsiness. So when do you take them?
During the day,
Yeah, and, are you driving after you take the medication?
Yeah, my grandma was on, 12 or I don't know. There was so many bottles. She didn't drive. But I mean, that has to just affect all of, everything, all everyday things. And then you wonder, does she really need to be taking all of that medication? But that's another,
that's another podcast with a pharmacist.
Well, I think rarely, you are seeing a lot of specialists, at that stage of life, and rarely are they meeting together and looking at how what they prescribed might interact with what someone prescribed for something unrelated, but it stacks up, and it's rare that you have someone look through the whole list and say this is, what all of this together is causing. So that's a great point that should be looked at for sure.
Absolutely.
How do kids stay supportive without sounding like they're accusatory, or, how do you stay supportive for your parents?
Well, I think, we hit on it earlier. Go in with objective findings and then go in with a plan.
There you go, the plan.
If you go in with a plan, Dad, McDonald's weekly is important. Haircut weekly is important. We understand all those things. We're all working. We understand you don't want to really use us because we're all working. But this is the plan. We're going to use neighbors. We're going to use grandkids. We're going to use the numerous kids that are local. And we are going to keep you independent. And we are going to get you to the places where you need to be. We want you to be safe.
And I think a lot of us adult kids we can manage that into our schedule if we know what it is. So if you get if you go to McDonald's every Wednesday, at a certain time, like we can do that, like, because we know that that's what it is. It's harder to do things randomly. So the schedule is probably pretty important, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. They just, it's communication.
Yeah.
It really is. Dad, we're concerned about you. We are approaching this because we love you. And because we love you, we want you to be safe. And because we love you and want you to be safe, we need to know where you need to be and when is that. And we don't want to control you.
Right.
We don't want to control you.
Because that's how they feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we want to enable you to do the things you still want to do and yet be as independent as possible.
I think proactively calling, whether it's weekly or, looking ahead at the month to what do you have going on this week that we can get you to, is so much better for the relationship than the senior having to consistently call their kids or grandkids with a need. It just changes that whole dynamic of, what's going on this week, how can we get you there? And plan it week by week if you have to, outside of the consistent things. What appointments do you have or not? But one thing you've said a couple times that I just wanted to say I love is that how you're phrasing it as retiring from driving versus stopping driving. That word change just is exactly what this process should be. It's not that you I don't know, it just has a whole different meaning, that it's something you did well for your whole life and you enjoyed and it was part of your life, and now you're just retiring from that and moving to a new phase. It's not something that you have failed at and you have to stop. And I love that that's how you phrase it.
Well, and it's, go back to the National Highway Traffic Safety Association. Dad, Mom, if we live long enough, we're still going to have to retire.
Yeah.
So, you may be having some cognitive issues, which they're denying also. Or at least they maybe don't know they're having cognitive issues. So it's just a matter of just really being kind.
Yeah.
Being kind and just, all older drivers are better historians than they are fortune tellers. So I had this one gentleman, he was 97 years old. And before I even took off my coat in his house, he said, young man, I've been driving for 90 years.
Oh, since he was 7?
I learned to drive a tractor on my grandfather's farm.
Yeah.
But as we got into the conversation, he didn't know the address of the house he lived in for 35 years.
Yeah.
He didn't have the cognitive ability to actually even take care of himself at home.
Yeah.
And his daughter was supporting him in that, but he was resistant to his daughter because his daughter was his daughter.
Yeah, I can't say enough in all of the things that third party expert can just help so much in
they can deliver the facts, and then the family can just deliver the support.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it works so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you teach classes on this. So how would somebody go to one of your classes, or you don't, or is that just you meet with them one-on-one?
Well, we meet with them one-on-one. We also do some public presentations.
Okay.
We do some CEUs for healthcare providers, social workers, case managers, and nurses. We're doing a presentation. If anyone's interested, we're doing a presentation through the Alzheimer's Association this Friday.
Okay.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, at Atrium Hospital, and they're talking about just having that delicate conversation.
Yeah.
So my presentation is going to be how do the different parts of the brain, people think of memory as being the only part. Probably that's important,
Yeah.
but executive functioning is even a bigger part of that. And then, so we'll talk about that, and then the last part of the talk will be, how do you have that conversation? What are some signs that are indicating it's time to have that conversation? Or if I'm talking to the older adults, how to how to manage that. One of the things, if the individual, if I think they're okay to drive, they're just at a regular, we'll also talk about how to prolong their safe driving years.
Oh, good.
So we'll talk about the importance of exercise.
Yeah.
There's a study out of Yale. This is a fascinating study out of Yale where they had two groups. One group, they said, go home, do some stretching and walk. Nothing more than that, stretching and walk. The other group, they said, go home, do nothing more than you've been doing. They brought the groups back, and on a simulator, the group that did just stretching and walking scored 35% fewer errors on a simulated test, and the group that did nothing actually scored poorer over 3 months than the first time they did it. Just how powerful exercise is, both for prolonging cognitive health and safe driving. And we'll also just talk about some of the things to help modify, whether it's avoiding, a lot of nighttime, avoiding highways, avoiding staying on roads that you're familiar with, those type things, just to help prolong that safe driving. But even those things, if there's cognitive issues or if they live long enough,
right,
they're going to run.
We're all going to retire from driving.
We're all going to retire. Hopefully.
That's right.
Hopefully.
That's one way or another, but we are all going to.
Yes.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to have you come out for an assessment, where would they find you? What would they need to do?
They could just reach out to us.
We'll put your information in the show notes with your website and your phone number.
Great.
Is this a program that is only available here in our area, or is it nationwide with Senior Care Authority?
That's a great question.
Over?
It's nationwide.
Awesome.
So if the adult children are hearing this, and mom's in St. Louis or Cleveland or Florida, we got a boatload of Senior Care Authorities in Florida.
Yeah.
They all have the program.
Okay, wonderful.
Some of them don't do the driving portion.
Okay.
Probably most of them don't do the driving portion, but
they can still get some resources.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
I think it bringing it back to the very beginning. That story is so poignant. You said his name's Matt. That just having to tell people that somebody's passed away is just, that's just, how important it is, how important.
Preventing.
I love that he saw that and did something with it, because that is awful. It's just awful. You don't want to have your loved one pass away, and you certainly don't want them to have had somebody else pass away because of them.
Well, and the scary statistic is if there's a car crash and there's a fatality, the chances of the individual expiring in the car crash, if they're 70 or older, is 3 to 5 times. Then Matt tells a story about a gentleman that went left to center. He was picking up something off the floor, went left to center, and the 80-year-old and the 85-year-old in the car that they ran into, they died. But the 24-year-old walked away from the accident. It's basically the frailty of the older driver.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming and sharing on such an important topic with us today. We appreciate it, and definitely encourage anybody that is seeing those signs that it might be time to retire from driving to reach out and get some more information. So
yeah, for sure.
We will be back next week with another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast, and thanks for listening.
Yep, thanks so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who might need a little downsizing inspiration. Have questions or ideas for future episodes? Reach out to us on our website, www.downsizingroadmap.com. Until next time, let's keep simplifying and moving forward.